Senators, I've listened carefully as everyone has spoken, and they speak of the initiative, and in many instances they say that it makes it impossible. It doesn't make it impossible to raise taxes. What it does is it makes it more unified in the community. You see, you can still raise taxes, it just requires a higher vote threshold. That higher vote threshold means that members of your community are in agreement, and they see this as a priority. And it's not just a bunch of folks that are here today and move to Arizona tomorrow. They're raising taxes on those who are going to stay here in perpetuity because they understand what a golden state this is. Then we talked about this bill. And as I read through the bill, I certainly understand that an industry would want to have a free pass on taxes from localities and would prefer to work with the state as a whole. I get that, but I also understand that if it's a good policy for one industry, why isn't it a good policy for all industries? Why aren't we doing this with everything? Why is it just limited to so narrowly if it's such a great policy? And finally, well, I shouldn't say finally on this point, when you look at this, it's kind of a sham of a bill. See, it only takes 21 votes to unwind what's been wound up. So we're saying, Lucy, we trust you with that football. We know that when we pass it today, it's going to stick. And next year, we aren't going to revisit it. But let's say we don't revisit it in a format of repealing it. What if we just run some pilot programs? And gosh, we all know how much we love our pilot programs. Perhaps our good friend from Berkeley could have a pilot program enabling her areas to get the same results in taxes through state law as opposed to local law. And if you do that, that means those folks that oppose this are going to be outnumbered by the entire state. So you're going to have the entire state imposing its will on a small community that may not agree. And finally, I agree, diabetes is a huge issue, it's a huge problem. And some of my colleagues have brought up the fact that they are targeting poor communities. But you know, when I walk into the grocery store, I don't see anything saying that EBT cards cannot be used for sugar drinks. If you really truly believe that this is a big issue, as you have stated, then why haven't that been targeted? Why are you allowing EBT cards to be used at fast food? We know that buying fresh vegetables, fresh food, and meat, and serving them in the correct proportions is the best thing you can do for your children. And yet, we prey on the poor by saying, we're going to make it easier for you to use the EBT cards in all these places that we know are not the best path for your children. So if you're saying that by taxing these sodas, you're going to save lives, I would submit to you, you would save more lives if you limited the use of EBT cards. And it really shows something where we're not punishing an industry for simply providing a product, but we're taking tax dollars and saying, you may not use the tax dollars to undermine the health of your children. But we haven't done that. Instead, we're trying to cut backroom deals. We're trying to usurp local control. And finally, we're not even fighting to allow the people to have the biggest and best voice. That initiative would mean that politicians like us would have to show up and do our job, and we would have to make strong points to the community of why it's in their best interest to vote an additional tax on themselves. And I think that we can make those arguments, and I think in the past we've been successful at it, but it's only when it made sense to everyone and not just to a few. Thank you.